Hey guys, this is Amber Rain Davis from NotableInk.com, and I am here today with some stencil technique combinations. So there's so many stencil techniques out there, but I think it's really fun to take some of those techniques and combine them into one element. So we're going to be doing that today on this card. 4 different techniques used together in combination. I'm going to be featuring the Hedgehog Hollow May kit, May 2019 kit. There are 3 stamp sets and 1 stencil included in this kit. The stencil is for the regular subscribers. You can see it here. So beautiful floral stencil, and I'm just taping a piece of navy cardstock that's from my stash to the back of the stencil. And I'm going to be using some Altenew embossing paste today and just putting a thin layer of embossing paste down on this stencil. I think actually just using the white embossing paste with this navy ink is also beautiful. Up top, if you're wondering what that is, I also use the stencil and the embossing paste on a piece of vellum, and I'm just having it dry up there because it really crinkled up. If you guys would like to see a project with that piece up there, let me know in the comments below. I didn't include that in today's project. So just smoothing out the embossing paste so that I have a thin layer. Just gently remove your stencil, and if you don't have time to immediately clean your stencil and your tool, pop them in some water until you do have time. And then while your embossing paste is still wet, generously apply your embossing powder. I'm using Antique Gold from Altenew here. And then knock it off, and do make sure that you treat your cardstock with an anti-static powder tool beforehand. I forgot to do that, so I do have some stray powder. And then I'm going to set this aside to dry for a little bit while I move on to the next step. And I've taken a piece of A2 size cardstock and I've embossed it with this stencil, so dry embossed it. So for me, my sandwich is cutting plate, plastic shim, the embossing pad, my cardstock, the stencil, and then another cutting plate, and I run that through my Gemini Junior. So now that I know that it's embossed, I'm going to go ahead and put the stencil back in place, and you just wiggle it around and it pops right into place. And I'm going to add tape from the back. So this is kind of acting double duty. It's nice that the stencil kind of fits in like a puzzle piece because it's going to actually help to hold it down while you're ink blending. And then I'm going to go ahead and use Antique Gold Pigment ink from Altenew. This is a new ink. And I'm going to ink blend this card piece. Now, this just adds that little extra something. So your recipient's going to get the card, and not only is it going to be gold ink blended, so it's going to be this beautiful metallic ink blending, but there's also going to be a texture to it, the same texture as the stencil. So it does a couple things. It adds a lot of nice texture, but also it allows you to have really crisp lines with your ink blending as well, which is also nice. Again, because it fits in like a puzzle piece and it doesn't move around and lift as much. So you don't get those kind of fuzzy lines that you sometimes get when your stencil moves a little. So this is a fantastic, I think, ink combination or a stencil technique combination to do. Your dry embossing and your ink blending. So cool. And you can see just what a pretty piece that is. So now that my piece is dried while I've ink blended, I'm going to go ahead and do some heat embossing here. Make sure that you preheat your tool for about a minute so that it's as hot as it can get. And then you can see nothing is happening. I'm holding my tool much further away from the paper than I normally do to start. My embossing paste isn't completely dry. I want to make sure that I don't burn it and that it doesn't sizzle too much. So I'm kind of preheating everything, and I'm keeping my tool moving. And this is all in real time. And then you can see I slow down. Once I slow down, you start to see that the embossing powder, you see how it's kind of like bubbling up down there? The embossing paste is bubbling up and getting dimensional. So it's actually getting taller than the layer that I put down. It's getting kind of fluffy, and then the powder is also melting. So you kind of get almost this like, it's it's boiling a little bit. It's a really cool texture. So you get really cool texture and dimension by doing this, much more than you would get if you just did standard heat embossing. So it's just really cool. I like it a lot. And I kept this in real time so that you could see I really took my time with it. I kept the tool moving because I did not want to get any burn marks on it. So we're almost done. And then once this is done, I'm going to let it cool down just a little bit so that, because I'm going to pick it up and fussy cut it. And if you don't let it cool all the way, then you're going to end up getting like a thumbprint. So you can see how cool that is. You can see how it's raised and all that beautiful texture. I went ahead and stamped a sentiment in navy, and the sentiment is from the Sophia Edges. And here's a close-up of all that texture and dimension. So just to recap, the first combination of stencil techniques that we did was embossing paste and embossing powder together. And that gave us this beautiful metallic look with that raised textured dimension. The second technique that we used was dry embossing our panel and then ink blending the dry embossing. The dry embossing not only adds beautiful texture to the paper, but it also works double duty to keep your stencil a little bit more locked into the paper for sharper edges when you're ink blending. So I hope that you enjoyed these techniques today and using them in combination and feel inspired to use maybe other stencil techniques that you know and in different pairings and combinations to get different looks. And this stencil was so fun to use and I so enjoyed this project. As always, all of the supplies are going to be linked below, so be sure to check that out. I will be back in 2 weeks with more inspiration for the Hedgehog Hollow May kit. And be sure to leave me a comment if you want to see that vellum piece incorporated into a project. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe button and be sure to press the bell if you want to be notified of when new videos come out. Happy Mother's Day if you're watching this on Mother's Day. Have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for stopping by.